So, Catherine, we're living longer than previous generations. What does that mean in terms of how we view work and retirement?
So, as many as 1 in 3 children born today in the UK have a decent chance of living to 100. So, I think that presents a fantastic opportunity for us all to think really differently about what we do and when we do it. When we work, when we learn, when we rest and play. But it also brings a big challenge, doesn't it? In terms of, do we all have the resources that it will take to sustain that sort of life and make the most of that opportunity over the course of longer lives? Do we have the money, the work, the health, the social connections?
So, what are people telling us about their work lives today and their aspirations?
Well, generally, if you ask them, most people do still expect to retire. And on average, that retirement date is around the age of 65. But there's big variation. And that variation, interestingly, has changed over time. So in some analysis that we did recently using the British Social Attitudes Survey, we found that there's a group of people 20 years ago who were expecting to retire in their 50s that's really declined in the last 20 years. And instead, what we see nowadays is many more people saying that they don't expect to retire until they're in their 70s. And in terms of work, really the thing that people say they're looking for at the moment, of all ages actually, is flexible work. And that's flexible in terms of when you work, how many hours you work, how you work, and where you work.
What's at stake if things don't change?
I think fundamentally, the risk is that it's only people with advantage and privilege that get to make the most of the opportunity of these longer lives. Because we're living in a society that is deeply riven with health and wealth inequality. So much so that if you take health and therefore people's capacity potentially to work, rich age 70 is the same as poor age 53. And so I think if we don't change, we're going to end up in a country that's a playground for the rich, a treadmill for the middle classes, and a workhouse for the poor.
So, what are the benefits to society if we get it right?
If we get it right, we all win. Government, business, young, old. It would be a world that is genuinely making the most of longer lives for all of us. And in terms of the world of work, it would be a world where flexible working is the norm. We wouldn't have this sort of idealised worker that can work full-time, that doesn't have any responsibilities or life outside of work. It would be a world where multiple careers and career changing and turning up in a brand new industry aged 50 is normal and expected and encouraged, where we're all going back to school and college and university throughout our longer lives to retrain, to reskill, to learn something new. And a world where we don't face the sorts of age discrimination that we know workers over 50 so often face when they're trying to find work.
So, if we could go into some of those things in a bit more detail, how do you think recruitment should change?
Well, I think fundamentally employers need to start checking their biases when it comes to age, as well as the other protected characteristics like ethnicity. So there was an experiment done. Actually, it's been replicated in lots of countries around the world where they age-blinded CVs. So they made it impossible for recruiters to tell how old the applicants were and sent those CVs off alongside equivalent CVs where it was possible to determine the age of the applicant. And those age-blind CVs got significantly more callbacks than the CVs that revealed how old these workers over 50 were. So fundamentally, I think employers need to be thinking about how can they design out age bias from their recruitment process. And then the other thing I would say is they absolutely need to be advertising flexible roles up front. It's not good enough to just say that you'll negotiate flexibility after you found the perfect candidate. You need to be clear that up front all roles can be worked flexibly if they can.
You mentioned flexible working there. What else could employers do to make sure that they retain their workforce as they get older?
Well, I think good employers know, particularly in the tight labour market that we have at the moment, that retaining the talent you've got is absolutely critical to success. And yes, providing good flexible work is a really important part of that. I think other things that matter too are support for people with caring responsibilities, not just new parents for children, but caring responsibilities for partners, for elderly parents. Support for people with health conditions and disabilities is really important too. As is thinking differently about retirement itself, perhaps less as a single moment, a single event, and a bit more as a sort of gradual process. And finally, I think employers need to be thinking about providing training and development and career progression for workers of all ages.
So looking at lifelong learning a bit more and retraining, what do we need to do to make that a reality?
We need really serious investment in lifelong learning, reskilling, retraining in this country, I think. And when I say investment, I mean investment from government, but also from business, and also from individuals themselves when they can afford it. It's just high time, I think, that we turn this rhetoric about skills gaps in our economy, about the need for reskilling, about robots taking over our jobs, into actual action and investment in lifelong learning.
So thinking about working longer, what kind of help do you think people need to help them navigate their careers over these longer lives?
I think we really need to widen access to good careers advice. I mean, when was the last time you saw a careers advisor? For me, it's probably school. I think we need to change that. If people are going to sustain longer working lives, realistically with multiple different careers, we need to make sure that people can access good quality careers advice. Our Careers Can Change campaign is really setting out to try and inspire people, particularly in midlife, that they still have time to be something else, to do something else, and to connect them to the sorts of great quality careers advice that does exist out there to help them on that journey.
So this feels like a big agenda for change.
I think it's a huge agenda, but we can do it. We can recast our social contract. Let's stop associating midlife with crisis. Let's help everybody grow and learn to find sustainable, fulfilling work over the course of longer lives that enable people to save for a decent future and decent retirement.